we're all kind of looking for it, aren't we? More good years, feeling better for longer, having that energy.
Yeah, exactly. That extra vitality.
So for this deep dive, we've really gone through a whole bunch of interesting sources, all trying to answer that big question. What actually helps us live longer, healthier lives?
It's a huge question, right? And today, our mission really is to pull together the key ideas from places like the NIH, Stanford, the AMA, even looking at what folks are saying on Reddit about nutrition.
Oh, interesting. Read it too.
Yeah, and also helpguide.org for stress and UHealth Collective on genetics. We want to give you the actionable stuff, the things that seem to really matter, without getting totally lost in the weeds.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump in. Maybe starting with the NIH. They had some pretty big numbers, didn't they? From those long studies, the nurses' health study and the health professionals' follow-up study.
They really did. And what's striking isn't just that healthy habits work. We kind of know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how much they work.
Mm.
The research points to 5 specific lifestyle factors.
5 key things.
Yeah. And getting all 5 right could mean, well, over a decade of extra life compared to doing none of them. That's huge. Like comparable to a major medical breakthrough almost.
Wow, over 10 years. Okay, so what are these 5? They're probably things we've heard before, but seeing the data like that.
Exactly. So first, a healthy eating pattern. Lots of, plant-based foods, vegetables, fruit, nuts, whole grains, getting enough of those good fats, the polyunsaturated and omega-3s.
Right, the ones that help with inflammation and stuff.
Exactly. And limiting the less healthy stuff, red and processed meats, sugary drinks, trans fats, too much salt.
Okay, diet. Makes sense. What else?
Then, pretty straightforward, not smoking. That's a big one, obviously.
Yeah.
Third, getting enough physical activity. They specify at least 3.5 hours a week of moderate to vigorous activity.
Okay, so like brisk walking or something more intense, 3.5 hours.
Yeah. Then moderate alcohol intake. That's defined as up to 1 drink a day for women, up to 2 for men.
Right. Moderation.
And finally, keeping a healthy weight. Specifically, a BMI between 18.5 and 24.9.
So diet, smoking, exercise, alcohol, weight. Those 5.
Those 5. And if you look at someone age 50, the difference is pretty dramatic. For women, not doing any of these things might mean a life expectancy around 79.
Uh-huh.
But doing all 5, it jumps to over 93.
93. That's incredible. And for men?
Similar jump. Around 75.5 years with none of the habits versus almost 88 with all 5. It really shows how those daily choices just add up,
Yeah, it really does. And you mentioned each one helps on its own. It's not like you have to do all 5 to see any benefit.
That's a key point. Each single factor was linked independently to a lower risk of dying from, well, anything, but also specifically from cancer and heart disease. So every little bit seems to help.
That's good to know. Okay, so habits are huge. What about something else Stanford was talking about? Social connection. That feels important, but maybe harder to measure.
It is harder to quantify sometimes, but the science is getting really strong here. Stanford calls social engagement a, quote, fundamental pillar of healthy aging.
A pillar, okay.
And here's the kicker. Being lonely or socially isolated. It's considered a health risk, right up there with smoking, obesity, or not exercising.
Wow. Really? As bad as smoking?
That's what the research suggests, yeah. The WHO is even calling it an epidemic, this loneliness issue.
That's wild. How does being lonely actually, hurt your physical health?
Well, research suggests that when you're isolated for a long time, it ramps up your stress response. It messes with something called the HPA axis. That's hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Okay. Sounds complicated.
It's basically your body's main stress control center. Chronic isolation kind of keeps that system on high alert all the time. A bit like the effects of ongoing stress early in life. You might feel it as always being a bit on edge, maybe.
Yeah, I can imagine that. You can never quite relax.
Exactly. It's a physiological thing, not just feeling sad. And it's common estimates say a third to maybe even over half of people in industrialized countries feel lonely.
That's a huge number of people feeling disconnected.
It really is. But the flip side is encouraging. Having strong social ties is estimated to boost your long-term survival chances by 50%. 50.
50% just from having good relationships.
Seems so. And our brains are actually wired for it. Good social interactions trigger dopamine release in our reward circuits. It feels good reinforcing those bonds.
Sounds like a biological reward for being social.
Pretty much. So Stanford's point is we should actively make social connection a reliable part of life no matter our age. Okay, so we've got habits, we've got connection, Let's talk exercise again. The AMA had some interesting points beyond just the basics.
Right, we know we need to move. Those guidelines, 150 to 300 minutes moderate or 75 to 150 vigorous.
Yeah, or a mix. But the AMA points to research showing that doing more than that can actually lower your mortality risk even further.
Ah, so exceeding the target is even better. It's not like there's a cap.
It seems there's a dose-response relationship, yeah. Moderate is, like you said, brisk walking, maybe lifting weights. Vigorous is running, swimming, stuff that really gets the heart rate up.
Got it.
So the study found that people doing 2 to 4 times the recommended moderate activity, that's 300, up to nearly 600 minutes a week.
Whoa, that's like 5 to 10 hours.
It is a lot. But those folks saw the biggest drop in risk of death from all causes, and specifically from heart disease and other issues.
Okay. What about the intense stuff, the vigorous exercise?
Doing more vigorous activity also helped. Going above the recommendation, like 150 to 299 minutes a week, showed a really significant drop in mortality, too. And no big surprise, mixing moderate and vigorous activity was also really beneficial.
But what if you're nowhere near even the minimums right now? Is it too late or not worth starting small?
Definitely not too late, and totally worth starting small.
Yeah.
Even just modest increases help. And they mentioned this interesting idea, VALPA, vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity.
VLPA.
Right.
Like, what is that?
Those really short, sharp bursts of activity you might do in your day, like legging it up the stairs or carrying heavy shopping bags quickly.
Oh, right. A little bursts.
Yeah, and some early research is even linking that kind of activity to lower cancer risk.
Huh. So even those little efforts count. And does this exercise benefit apply equally as we get older?
Yeah, the studies show the mortality benefits hold up across the different age groups they looked at.
That's good. And one more thing on exercise. What about people who do really high intensity stuff for years? Any sign that's bad for the heart long term?
That's a great question.
Mm.
The research they cited suggests that actually long-term high-intensity vigorous exercise doesn't seem to cause harm to the cardiovascular system. Though they do add a little caveat that more long-term research is always good.
Okay, that's reassuring for the hardcore athletes out there. Right, let's switch gears to diet. Always a big topic. We've got stuff from Harvard and also that Reddit discussion.
Absolutely. Diet is, well, obviously crucial for longevity and avoiding chronic disease. But Harvard makes a really good point. It's less about finding the perfect rigid diet and more about the overall pattern.
So like the general approach.
Yeah. Focusing on getting more whole, minimally processed foods, especially plants, fruits, veggies, grains, legumes, nuts. And at the same time, cutting back on the really heavily processed foods, the ones often loaded with sugar, bad fats, salt.
That makes sense. They mentioned some examples like the Mediterranean diet.
Exactly. Mediterranean, healthy plant-based diets, even the Okinawan diet. They're examples of good patterns. But the idea is you can kind of mix and match, find what works for you and what you actually enjoy. Because if you don't enjoy it,
don't stick with it. Yeah.
right, adherence is key. Harvard also mentioned something interesting, the social side of eating. Making mealtime a shared thing can be good for emotional well-being, too.
Oh, that's a nice thought. Eating together.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the Reddit discussion? What were people saying there?
It was fascinating, a real mix. The Mediterranean diet popped up a lot, seen as pretty science-backed. But a lot of people were saying, hey, it's not just about food.
Right, like the whole picture.
Exactly. Stress, social life, being active, especially walking. Lots of mentions for just plain walking. It all ties together.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else?
Well, there was chatter about blue zones, those areas with lots of really old people.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of those.
Some folks were a bit skeptical, wondering if it's been maybe overhyped or used a bit for marketing.
Ah, interesting point. Were people talking about specific diets they follow?
Oh, definitely. You saw mentions of paleo, AIP, vegan, carnivore, keto, high protein, like the whole spectrum.
Wow, yeah.
But the common thread, again, was generally favoring whole foods over processed stuff and being wary of too much sugar. That phrase, eat food, not too much, mostly plants, seemed to capture a lot of the sentiment.
Simple but effective, maybe?
And again, that theme of adherence. Whatever you choose, you have to be able to stick with it long term. That seemed like the biggest hurdle for many.
Yeah, consistency is tough. Okay, so finding a sustainable, enjoyable way to eat seems key. Let's talk about stress then. Helpguide.org had insights on this, right? It often feels like something we just have to endure.
Right. But Help Guide really emphasizes that we actually have more control than we might think. Stress management isn't about eliminating stress entirely. That's probably impossible.
Yeah, probably.
It's more about having techniques to handle the overall level, react better when things get tough, and build up our resilience. The goal is like finding a better balance.
Okay, so how do we do that? Where do we start?
First step, they say, is figuring out what actually causes your stress. And that includes not just external stuff, but maybe our own thoughts or habits. Keeping a stress journal can really help pinpoint those triggers.
Like tracking when you feel stressed and why. Makes sense.
And then, importantly, swapping out unhealthy ways of coping, like, reaching for junk food or zoning out too much with healthier strategies.
Okay, like what kind of strategies?
They have this neat framework called the 4 A's. Avoid, alter, adapt, accept.
Avoid, alter, adapt, accept.
So, avoid unnecessary stress.
Hmm.
Learn to say no sometimes. Alter the situation if you can maybe express your feelings instead of bottling them up. Adapt to the stressor if you can't change it. Try to reframe the problem or look at the bigger picture. And accept the things you truly can't change, which is hard, but sometimes necessary.
That's a really practical way to think about it. Avoid, alter, adapt, accept.
Yeah. And beyond that, they list a bunch of other helpful things. Moving your body more, any activity helps, especially rhythmic stuff like walking or swimming, getting better at managing your time, prioritizing, breaking tasks down.
Time management, yeah, that's a big one for stress.
Definitely. And reaching out, connecting with people face-to-face is often best.
Sure.
Making actual time for fun and relaxation. Hobbies, humor, maybe yoga or meditation.
Don't forget fun.
Never forget fun. And of course, just maintaining that healthy lifestyle baseline. Good food, limiting caffeine and sugar, avoiding smoking or excess alcohol, getting enough sleep. They even mention quick things you can do in the moment, using your senses to calm down.
So it's really a whole package of tools, isn't it? Tackling it from different angles. Okay, one last piece. Genetics. From You Health Collective. This is where people often feel like, well, it's just in my DNA.
Exactly. There's this feeling of genetic destiny sometimes. But You Health Collective pushes back on that. They stress that genes play a role, sure, but our lifestyle can really influence how those genes play out.
So it's not set in stone.
Not at all. They use analogies like, someone might have a natural talent for music or sports, but they still need to practice to get really good.
Yeah.
Lifestyles like the practice for your genes. Their key message is genetics is not destiny, it is modifiable.
I like that. Modifiable. How does that work in practice?
They talk about anticipatory medicine. Basically, if you know you have a family history, say, of lung cancer, that gives you even more reason to make lifestyle choices, like definitely not smoking. Or if heart disease runs in your family, you'd really double down on those heart-healthy habits.
So knowledge is power here. It helps you tailor your approach.
Precisely. And it's interesting, the research they cite, like from Scandinavia, suggests genetics probably accounts for maybe 20 to 30% of how long we live.
Only 20 to 30%. That's actually less than I might have thought.
Yeah, it's significant, but it leaves a huge amount influenced by other factors. And it's not one single gene, it's a whole complex mix. We can't change the genes we inherit, but a healthy lifestyle seems to encourage them to express themselves in ways that protect us from chronic diseases.
That's really empowering. And they mentioned something about people with hereditary risks.
Yes, this was fascinating. Some preliminary research suggests that if you do have a known hereditary risk for something like cancer, making those positive lifestyle changes might benefit you even more than someone without that risk.
Wow. So lifestyle isn't just leveling the playing field. It might even give you an extra edge against your genetic predisposition.
That's what some early findings suggest. It really drives home how much agency we have, regardless of the genetic hand we were dealt.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, pulling together everything from this deep dive, what are the big takeaways?
Well, a few really strong interconnected themes jump out, don't they? First, the massive impact of those basic healthy habits we talked about from the NIH diet, activity, not smoking, etc. They really add up.
Yeah, that decade-plus figure is hard to ignore.
Then, the crucial importance of social connection, which Stanford highlighted. It's not just nice to have, it's a biological necessity, almost.
Right, up there with not smoking.
Exactly. Then, exercise the AMA showed us that meeting the guidelines is good, but exceeding them, if you can, might be even better. And even small bits count.
Like VLP.
Like VLP. And with diet, the consensus from Harvard and Reddit seems to be less about strict rules and more about a pattern of whole foods, finding something sustainable and enjoyable for you.
And managing stress, the help guide advice showed it's something we can actively work on with the right tools, like the 4A's.
Absolutely. And finally, the U Health perspective on genetics, that our lifestyle choices are powerful modulators, giving us significant influence over our health destiny. even with predispositions.
So it really feels like there's no single magic pill, is there? It's more about these consistent threads, habits, connection, movement, food, stress management, and leveraging lifestyle against our genes.
That is exactly. These themes kept coming up across all these different sources, offering a pretty clear roadmap, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, thinking about all these areas we've covered.
Habits, connection, exercise, diet, stress, even how you think about genetics.
Yeah, which one of those resonates most right now? Or where do you see maybe the biggest opportunity for a small positive shift in your own life?
Because remember, even those seemingly small, consistent steps can make a really big difference over the long haul. It's worth thinking about how these pieces fit together for you personally.